difficult as operational, right? Jillian, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think perhaps mine is not going to sound dissimilar to many of you out there. I think it's size and scaling things. Honeywell, the company I work for, is in more than 144 countries. We have over 100,000 employees, give or take 10,000 or so, depending on quarter and so on. And so making a program that is one program for that company that hits all of those places, that keeps the core, and yet is scalable and tailored at the same time. It's a really important thing to find the right balance, right? You both need to be tailored and you need to be one thing scaled across the world. And that really, the foundation for that is the code of conduct. So that's the starting point of it. But even with the code, putting on the code, it's like everyone is wearing the same jacket. It's the code of conduct. But we have different sizes. Some of us are petite and some of us are not so petite and some of us are tall and some of us have long arms or a long torso. And getting that to fit in all the places, I think, continues to be the challenge for our program, ensuring that we've got it fitting in the right place wherever we are in the world.
And yours is super interesting because as we were talking about the other day, it's not just, the delivery of, and packages in the marketplace, but also you guys are in, entertainment, right? So super interesting that you're across a bunch of industries. So how would you answer the question?
Yeah, it's tough to peg an industry. And you're right, it's across a number of different industries. And I think one of the things that is both a challenge and exciting about my team and the role we play for the company is understanding those industries. Right, so we are in heavily regulated spaces like payments, also healthcare, but we also operate in studios, which, for anyone who engages in Hollywood is very different. The cultural norms and expectations across the different industries in which we operate are very different, and we have to understand, I think going back to putting ethics and culture in the driver's seat of business strategy, literally having to read from the screen, it's a very long title, is understanding those industries, but then also working with our business leaders within each industry to not only get a seat at the table, but maintain and keep that seat at the table by earning their trust, showing that we understand their business, showing that we understand that our gift reporting policy, which applies globally across industries, may have to be a little more nuanced when you're talking about Oscar gift bags, for example. So it's helpful to really dive into the industry and learn kind of more broadly about a specific industry before we even engage with those business leaders.
Yeah, no, this is so fascinating, right? I think the idea around putting your program in place for the country and regions that you're in is really critical. One of the things we're all doing so much of is the use of data and looking at data, as you're saying, from the perspectives of each of the countries, but really digging into it and saying when you go to the leader, for example, who's sitting in Asia, in China, for example, what is the data saying about behaviors in China, and how is that different from what the data may be saying about behaviors in Mexico? As a head of a global program, I have to be in sync with all of that, right? And so as we think about what makes you, how effective is your program being? Are you monitoring? Are you testing? Is the business strategy that you're driving, are you arming the leaders with the right data? You constantly come back to the regional approach of it. And when you're in a complex company that is global, that discussion really falls initially with parts of my team that are in the regions where they function, and that they have that relationship, that situational awareness that I may not have, because I'm running a global program while sitting in Charlotte. And no matter how many times I fly to whatever country I fly to, it is not the same as being there. So it's a real, I think the idea of being global and being in many places really turns on you constantly having that situational awareness as the leader, but also ensuring that your teams are having the opportunity to not only talk to you, right? Because those of us in the US, we can be a tad US-centric, I count myself in that group, but also that they're talking to each other. One of the ways that we ensure that the strategy that we have at the core is moving out to wherever the core and the center is in a region is over communicating and repeating some messages over again, and then ensuring that people are talking amongst themselves about the messages, about the data, and about the strategy in the program.
Thank you. Ula, turning for a moment to generational diversity in the workplace, how should your approach to culture differ or adapt when you're working with, multiple generations within an organization?
So one thing we know is that everybody's value set is different. Everybody's individual value set, like all of you woke up today and everybody, we're all ethical, sure, but fundamentally we have different ways of looking at the world, and that's okay. The trick is that when you come to work, you need to look at the world the way that BMO says you do when you're working. And the challenge that we're facing now, the generational challenge that we're facing now, more so probably on the Canadian side, but COVID, we were very, very locked down for a very long time. And people got super comfortable and used to working from home. And now we're at this stage where you see companies saying, okay, enough. You need to come back to the office. You need to come back. Some are saying 5 days a week. We're looking for 2. We're looking for 3. And it's hard. And so the cultural aspect of the generational piece is it's much easier to still work, but also take care of an aging relative or a family member or young kids or just your life and have that flexibility. So from a cultural point of view, on the one hand, we have a lot of empathy, that we understand that people have obligations, but on the other hand, we do think that collaboration, innovation, and really those cultural markers are really important when you're in the office. We've onboarded a lot of people during COVID, and some people had never been to the office. So how do you make sure that people get the benefit of learning from leaders or learning by example, or those passing, when you pass somebody after a meeting and you see how they've performed, and you can say, hey, that was really great. Next time, just give that quick feedback, the in-the-moment feedback. Those opportunities for connections are gone when you are remote. And I know, there's a lot of companies and a lot of industries that have been remote for a very long time, and that's fine, but I'm just saying for our company and for the work that we do and the problem solving and the innovation, it's really, really tricky. But on the other hand, we're about respect and integrity and transparency and empathy. And empathy is one of our values, actually. So people will say, well, if you're empathetic, then you should let me work from home because I am productive. One of the biggest things we could do to incentivize in a non-financial way is to part with people who aren't aligned with our values. And that's really, really difficult, but that's probably the biggest shift that a company can do, is to move, to make movements and to take people out of the company, to exit people who just are not doing, who aren't behaving the way that we all know they're not behaving, but it's kind of a thing and it costs money. Maybe you have to pay them to go, but that's the biggest incentivization that we can think of.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was in practice, that was the position that I would take, and I met some resistance from time to time. The other observation I have from my experience is it wasn't always applied equally across the organization, right? So if you were a big revenue generator, perhaps you got a second bite at the apple, so to speak, whereas if you weren't in that position, you were in a functional role, you were out very, very quickly.